What's up everyone, this is Meher, and in this video we are going to look at the concept of prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. So what that means is that we are going to take a no-code approach, because what I want you to take away from this video is that have a really deep understanding of how this whole system works. So just like any other system, even your prototype system has kind of some key components, and these key components also follow some rules. So the first one is the prototype property. So this prototype property is basically an object, or it points to an object. The second key component in prototypes is the bracket, prototype, bracket. And in Chrome, it's square brackets, and in Firefox, it's an angle bracket. So what this property is, this is kind of an internal property which is used by browsers. And this property basically points to the prototype property which we talked about earlier. So the third property is your __proto__, and this is an external API version of your bracket prototype. What that means is basically it gives you access to mutate this property, because with bracket prototype you can't do that. So what are the rules that these key components follow? So the first rule is that your prototype property is only available on functions. The second rule is that your bracket prototype, which is the internal prototype, is available on both functions and objects. And it is immutable because it's accessed only by the browser. The third one follows the rule of the second one, which is your __proto or dunder proto is available on both functions and objects. And there's new information here that we see that it's actually a getter function, which means if you create an object, if you open it up, you will not find __proto in the new versions of your browser, because this property is only available on the prototype object of your object constructor. So if you have made it this far in this video, it will really help the YouTube algorithm if you hit the like button. So with that, now let's move on to an interesting aspect where we talk about two important objects in your JavaScript environment. And these two important objects are basically your standard built-in objects as called by MD and docs. They are your function constructor and object constructor. If you open up your dev console and you just type out object and hit enter, you're going to see that it is a function which has a list of properties. And you can see that it has prototype property, and it also has this internal prototype. And similarly, if you open the prototype property, we see that some of the properties that we already know are available here. For example, has on property, value of, toString, etc. And you see that there is get set version for your __proto. And similarly, your function constructor has some interesting properties like that. For example, if you open up the prototype object of your function constructor, we see that those important functions which are call, apply, bind is present in this particular object. So you must be thinking right now, why do we care about these two functions? For example, when you create an object, where does your object end up pointing to? It ends up pointing to the prototype object of this object constructor. So if we simplify what we just saw on the dev console, we can bring up a slide and we can put up two boxes, green box for a function and yellow box for an object, and just represent the whole idea which we saw on the dev console. So your green box, you can see, has two properties, which is __proto and prototype, which basically follows the rules that we discussed. And secondly, the yellow box, which is the object, it has all these utility functions that is available to us, has on property, toString, value of, etc. Even there's a property called as constructor, which is available on this prototype object, which basically points back to the function itself. And there are some nuances with this property, because constructor property is unfortunately not immutable. And similar to the object constructor, we have the function constructor, the green box for the function, yellow box for the object, and your function has your __proto and prototype, which points to the yellow box, which is an object which has all these useful utility functions called as call, apply, and bind. And again, it has __proto property. So now the question is, where should this __proto point to, which is in the object and even on the function? So now let's try to establish some relationship so that we understand this and expand it to the examples that we will explore in the upcoming idea of creating new object and then connecting these dots. So if we look at the __ property on the prototype object of the function constructor, it should be pretty obvious that because this is an object, it should have access to properties like has own property or value of or toString. So what that means is the proto property on the prototype object of the function constructor should point to the prototype object of the object constructor. And although I'm using _ proto to make this connection, internally browser is actually going to use -- prototype. So now that leaves us with the proto property, which is present on the function constructor and the object constructor's main body. So if you think for a second, every function in JavaScript should have access to call, apply, and bind. And where does call, apply, bind exist? It exists on the prototype property of the function constructor. So that means the proto property on the object constructor should point to the prototype object of the function constructor. And similarly, the proto property on the function constructor should point to its own prototype object. And this is a really interesting diagram that kind of opens up new possibilities when we are going to learn about how do we do subclassing or how do we create new instances in JavaScript in the next video. So before I close out on this video, I want to show you something, and that is going to be this, a complete prototype chain with our own custom class and with our own custom subclass, and we create instances out of these. And this is what we are going to do in the next video. We are going to look at how we can create instances, how does the whole linking happen, and how does the whole subclassing happen with the prototype system, although we are not going to use it in our code bases, but it will really give you a strong foundational understanding of how the object system in JavaScript works. And lastly, this video is actually the 6th video of this series, and I've created 5 videos which explains 5 different ways this keyword works. So I highly encourage you to check those out, because once we go into the next part of this video, it is going to really come in handy, because once we start using this keyword, it can get really fuzzy. So please check that out, and I'll see you in the next one.